The purpose of this video is to show some of the common errors I see residents making when they're beginning to learn their simple interrupted suturing techniques. The first one is basically trying to use every little last bit of that suture material and just tying knots and cutting until you have this tiny little edge of suture left. The problem with doing this is you're going to have to end up tying real close to the wound. You're going to end up with that needle real close to your fingers. You risk a needle stick injury. It's just not worth it to risk a needle stick. It's better to get rid of that suture and open up a new one when it's starting to run short. The second error that I often see is tying too close to the knot. So basically, as I showed in my other demo video, you want to try and do your loops really far away from where you're going to end up tying. If you do it right over the knot, what you risk doing is pulling upwards on your knot as opposed to across the wound, and that's going to leave you with what's called a floating knot that really does very little to help hold the tension on that wound. And the final common error is taking too shallow of bites when you're doing your suturing. What you want to try and do is make sure that the depth of penetration is actually wider than the margin of the length of the wound. If your depth of penetration is too little, what you're going to end up doing is taking a shallow bite. And the problem with this is you're not going to get that wound edge eversion that you're looking for that's going to help the scar to flatten out as it contracts down as it's healing. What you might end up doing instead is getting an inverted wound, which is going to cast some funny shadows and leave a more prominent scar at the end of the day. Also, as you see, the way this suture ends up sitting is a little bit different than the adjacent sutures, and that's simply because the bite was too shallow. So these are just 3 common mistakes that you want to think about to improve your simple interrupted suturing technique.